Okay, so let's imagine this scenario. You've worked your whole career thus far. You've worked your way up into a respectable role. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in a position where in addition to your salary or bonus, you also receive what they call equity compensation, stock options, restricted stock units. And this is unfamiliar to you. So you look at that and you go, and the employer is talking about like, oh, we have this great additional, equity compensation component of your pay. And you're going, I don't even know what this is. What is this? Why are you offering it to me? How should I think about this in relation to maybe another job offer I have? What is this whole space of equity compensation? Let's talk about it. There's a lot of confusion around the equity compensation. It is a little bit technical. We're not going to go too deep on the technical details today. I want to equip you with why do employers offer equity comp? What are some of the basic vocabulary and kind of events on the timeline of you receiving these things? What are the tax implications? And what is the investment concentration risk? Okay, let's dive in. Let's start from the employer's perspective. Why are they giving you, an employee, stock in their company? Well, if you think about it, if you're receiving this equity compensation, you're likely in a role where you're kind of getting up into where your personal performance and your role impacts the company as a whole in a larger way than maybe earlier in your career. And so from the company's perspective, they are literally and figuratively giving you ownership. They're giving you stock in the company. And then therefore, hopefully from your own mindset, you're really incentivized to work hard so that the company will do well, so that your own compensation will reflect that performance as well. The other reason employers offer it, it's the idea of the golden handcuffs, right? As we'll see here, they don't give it to you all at once. They kind of give it to you and then it vests over time. We'll cover those details here in a bit. And so meaning like you have kind of this value, but it's not fully realized yet. And so that incentivizes you to stick around. It's also a retention mechanism for a lot of employers that they use with these employees. So that's why they're offering it to you. And it absolutely is a great benefit, especially if you're someone who feels like this company has some upside to it as far as the stock, as far as the outlook overall. And also if you're someone who's incentivized by personal performance impacting my personal reward, if that's attractive to you, then that could be a really good benefit as you're evaluating multiple job offers, maybe some with equity comp, some will not. So let's kind of dive into some of the basics here, and we'll start on the more straightforward end of the spectrum. We'll work our way to the more advanced. Let's start with restricted stock units. Here's how that works. Key vocab number one, grant. When you are granted restricted stock units, there'll usually be a separate type of an account, kind of like a 401k, but maybe with the same company as your 401k, maybe with a different company. And in that account, you'll see a line item. Usually has like an identification number and maybe a date, and you'll see a number of shares. That is a grant. So sometimes the word grant is used as like the noun, the thing, the grant itself. And it's also used as a verb, like the company is granting you those units. So you see that and you go, oh my goodness, that number of shares times the current stock price, that's a lot of money. I want to sell it and go buy a car. Not so fast. Key vocab number two, vest. I mentioned you don't get access to all of that value all at once. They kind of dole it out over time. That is the vesting schedule. So for example, you might get 1,000 shares, but it vests over 4 years at a quarter each time, right? So you get 250 shares at each year as it vests. So you have to stick around with the company to continue to get that value as it vests, right? So that's the retention mechanism. So what happens here? So we got grant and we've got vest. Let's talk tax. So a lot of people are surprised at the tax implications of equity comp in general. So you need to know that going in. This is going to impact your tax. But the good news is it will only impact your tax if you're getting money. So if you're receiving compensation, that's a good thing. But as we know, with just a general concept of a paycheck, if you're getting compensation, you're going to have to pay tax on it, right? So when you are granted RSUs, restricted stock units, from a tax standpoint, nothing happens. Because again, you haven't really received that value yet. It's only as at each vesting period, when you receive those shares and you actually own them, that's when you owe tax. And most plans, they should actually account for the tax via your W-2, your paycheck. You need to reach out to that company that's holding your stock plan and clarify that with them. Because a lot of times what they'll do is they'll actually sell some of those shares when it vests. in order to cover the taxes, and they'll go ahead and withhold it and send it to the IRS. You just need to be aware of the particulars of how that's handled at your plan, your company's plan. So we've got RSUs, we've got grant, we've got vest. Now, when you get that stock, what do you do with it? Okay, so you could just let it ride and just let that stock grow because hopefully the company does really well and that stock will grow and grow and grow. Now, what happens is what if you have years and years of grants and vesting and all of a sudden the stock grows and all of a sudden you look up and half of your portfolio is in this one stock? From an investment standpoint, no bueno. So typically the advice from people like me who are pro diversification, pro kind of a long-term, investment mix, typically you'll hear people like me say to diversify that stock. So you have to kind of have a plan going into this equity comp experience. What's going to happen when it grants? Nothing really from a tax standpoint or otherwise. What's going to happen when it vests? I will owe tax. I need to know, does the company who manages this plan, are they going to account for all of that? And then now that I own these vested shares, what am I going to do with them? You want to be intentional about that and follow that plan. Ideally, that's where someone like me comes into plan because I do this for a living, right? And so our financial planners will have reminders in our system to go, hey, remember we talked about this? What's the plan for that? And keep you on track and accountable. So we talked about RSUs. Let's talk about stock options. First, let's start with this. There's a lot of similarities with the restricted stock units in terms of the grant and the vest and all. But firstly, I want to just cover what is an option, because you can have options outside of an employer or you can have stock options with an employer. But just in general, an option, if you hold an option, right, as an investment, then you have the option of buying that particular stock at a given price at some point in the future. It's like this, almost like an IOU, right? In your pocket, you go like, I have the option where I can proactively come in and choose to buy the stock. Wherever the stock is trading at price-wise, I have the option to buy this many shares at this price, come what may. So if you think about it, going back from the employer's perspective, again, they're going to give you options and you have the option to buy those shares at any time you want, right? And obviously you as the employer are going to work hard to pump up the price of the stock itself. So when you come in and buy it at this price, right, that you're guaranteed, you're coming out really well. It's a built-in gain, right? So if I have the option to buy it $100, I work really hard, the company does well and the stock's at $200, well, I just bought a $200 stock for $100. It's a good deal. So let's come back to the equity comp piece. Very similar mechanically to the RSUs. You are granted the options. Guess what? You can't act on them yet, right? You still have to wait till the vest period, and usually they vest over time. So at the vest period, slight difference here. There's no tax implication yet, but you do now have the active option to actually buy the stock when you choose. So again, grant, vest over time. And then as they vest those options, you then have to make the proactive choice of when you're going to formally acquire the shares of stock. Different than the RSU. The RSU is grant, and when it vests, guess what? Here's the shares. Take them, right? Pay tax on them. With the option, grant, vest, and then now you have to decide when, if you exercise the options. And usually, heads up, there's an expiration on the option too. So most it varies by plan. So you just need to know flat out when that is. It's not going to be too quick. It's not going to be like 6 months or a year. It may be like 5 years or 10 years, right? You have to exercise the option. But anyway, this is different, right? So you have to come in ideally with the consultation of a financial planner and have a plan of, as these options are vesting, when to exercise them. So the point at which you exercise them, you now own the shares. Guess what? Same dilemma as the RSUs. You have to know what to do with them. What are you going to do with those shares when you own them? Because as I said, if you just let that accumulate over the years, you look up and 20, 30, 50% of your portfolio is in a single stock. And that's not good from a risk perspective. So again, someone like me who's pro diversification, pro financial planning will probably tell you as soon as you exercise them, sell them, diversify them into another portfolio. I should briefly caution, there are two different types of stock options that your employer could offer, one of which is called a non-qualified stock option. The other is called an ISO incentive stock option. Just bookmark this for the future. If you have an ISO plan, incentive stock option, it could be in your best interest when you exercise and actually buy the shares at that guaranteed price. It could be in your best interest to wait before you sell it. You can get more favorable tax treatment if you wait. There's all kind of detail around this topic that you would want to go into if that's you, but I just want you to kind of like perk up your ears. If you hear ISO, you have an ISO plan. When you exercise your shares, you may not want to sell them all immediately, right? So there's two different types of plans. I'll come back to this from the top of there's so many different moving pieces to equity comp, particularly on the options. There's the tax impacts. There's the timeline of when all this happens. And not to mention you have all this other taxation topics going on with the other areas of your finances. You really need a plan to navigate all of that, right? You need to go into this already knowing I'm going to exercise this at this date. My RSUs are going to hit on this date, and I'm going to work this into the other areas of my finances. It's hard to do that if you don't do that for a living. So, really our recommendation is have a relationship with a trusted financial professional who's competent, who knows all this stuff, who gets to know you and kind of layers on this equity comp strategy on top of the rest of your financial plan. That's really the best way to come about it, is this nuanced approach of what's vesting when are we going to exercise what, and then how are we going to diversify it and account for the taxes. I guess suffice to say, wherever you find yourself on the timeline, probably the best time to reach out is yesterday, and the second best time to reach out is today. Put a plan in place and really take charge of this aspect of your financial life and really every aspect of your financial life, and do it with a competent professional. We would be honored to go through that process with you, walk alongside you, and help you take charge of your finances. There is a link in the description below. Feel free to click on that. It'll just take you right to a calendar, and you can book a complimentary initial conversation with one of our planners.